अस्सलाम वालेकुम फर्रुख, how are you? कैसा जा रहा है आपका Thursday? Hello Junaid, hi Saira. Welcome back to everyone who are familiar faces. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to new faces. This is the 15th Cube EduTour live chat that I'd like to welcome everyone to. I see some new faces coming on, which is fantastic, and of course the old faces, familiar faces of friends of the community. Always good to have you back. Hope everyone's enjoying their summer and quarantine and lockdown restrictions and benefits and privileges as well. So good. I hope the sound is good. Today I'm hoping that there'll be no technical issues like we had the other day with Jean, and that's been tested and sorted out. So with any luck, Monday's transmission with all of you will be much clearer. We figured out what the network issues were, why there was a lag in the sound from my side, and why the picture wasn't clear from her side. It's been tested. So agle hafte we should be much smoother in our journey through all of this. I just want to say something quickly in terms of just recontextualizing what it is that we do here for the new faces who've joined us, and as a quick reminder for some of the regular members of this community coming back. Please remember that Cube EduTours is an educational initiative which uses tourism and taking people to architectural heritage sites only, specifically, to expose them not only to the fact that these magnificent structures, these magnificent moments in our history exist, for us to understand why they exist, where they came from, what is their relevance, what is their context, why they matter to us, to answer the so what questions. So it's not really about just getting us there, to take a picture and come away. It's really to get there and to peel away the layers, to understand the regional relevance, to understand where these buildings have come from, where the design ideas came from, the role that trade and economics played in transference of design and engineering ideas. Where did the motives come from? Were they being used somewhere else? How did they travel across? How did we take them onto ourselves? The role that they've played in our cultural development. And over the years, the cultural development, I'm talking about 5,000 years history at least, if not more. So please keep in mind that 5,000 year history, which we track through our architectural heritage buildings, is our channel to understand the role of these buildings, the journey that this region of the river Indus, we today call Pakistan, has taken in all of these millennia. And because it's an educational initiative and we're looking at how one will learn, how one will reconstruct, reconfigure learning models, teaching methodologies, post-pandemic, we do live in the reality of a digital age. So the purpose of these chats is not really open mic for anybody who's a friend of mine to come on and kill some time with me. There is a very specific reason I bring on board the people I bring on board. I am blessed to know some of the coolest people across the world who are doing brilliant work, profound work, and prolific work. So today's guest is going to be Marvi Mazhar. I don't know if she's here yet or not, but I will just check. I just thought that'd be a good time to give you that background in terms of trying to figure out a cultural history, trying to figure out a new narrative for the future of education and within our own identity, to actually be able to define and construct that term identity as a Pakistani. So Marvi is on here. I will bring her on board and then give you an introduction to the Marvi. I've just sent her it. So that gives you a background on what it is that we're doing here. There is an agenda.
Hi, Zan.
Hello.
How are you? Okay. Seems like it's okay.
Why are you stressed and nervous? This is great.
Huh? This is great.
Smile for us.
I can't hear you clearly.
Don't say that. You been through
No,
that.
it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's okay.
There was a lot of problems. So, Marvi, I was just about to introduce you. If you give me a couple of minutes, I just finished of what it is that we're doing here and explaining to people that today is the 15th session and there is an agenda. It's usually based around the understanding of a future of using architectural heritage buildings that we will unwrap and unpack as I do when I write. But now have the opportunity of sharing these ideas in a much more public domain, having participants share their expertise, their experience, and actually be able to create ideation about what this new now post-pandemic in a digital age will be, keeping in mind that the focus for me is going to be education through architectural heritage sites. That's my focus, right? So now for everyone else to introduce you to Marvi. Marvi, dear friend of mine, also apart from being taken for granted because of that, also a young but senior, taken very serious heritage consultant in Karachi and in Pakistan. She sits on a variety of boards and is nose deep constantly and looking at ways of how to make Karachi, how to make our lives in Karachi better, how to improve the condition of the buildings. She has started Pakistan Chalk Cultural Community Center years ago. That was an incredible initiative that has created a whole bunch of other similar models across the city. She has also taken over the baton from Sabine, first director at T2F for the time there. She now has also created a brainchild called Heritage Walk Karachi that is, again, I would like to say, being copy-pasted or inspired by others. Nothing better, no better flattery than somebody taking a model and replicating it. And in the years that I've known Marvi, who is a architect, driven by her passion for architecture, the new and the city that she lives in recently, has been doing these amazing photos of the beach. Marvi, I discussed your beach without your permission, apologies, with Jean last Monday. And you have been taking the most poetic, the most profound, very gentle, but very, very rich photographs of found natural objects on the beach, some wild vegetation that we would not see, and you've seen and captured it, dead jellyfish, footprints of animals, of birds, of people past. Your pictures have managed to the shimmery mica of our beach. And I just think it's so interesting that for someone like you who is so, like I said, nose deep, brick and mortar, restoration, recreation, construction, figuring out the old techniques, bringing in the craftsmen, bringing in the tile makers. There's constantly a revival, a very beautiful revival that is involved in. That how is it, what I really want to know how you're feeling about the beach and why is it that you're drawn to these really ephemeral things that are moving back and forth from our shoreline, because they're there, the next day the tide will come in and take them, then you'll have a new set of objects to look at. So it's a very transient, very temporary environment that you do. And it's interesting because we are now in a transition because of the pandemic in all of our understandings of who we are, where we will be, our relationships with each other. Look at this conversation. You and I could be normally would have sat in one room and done this. But the old normal is now obsolete. It's irrelevant. So given that being our context, just share with me, because I haven't had a chance to talk to you about this. And I thought, so I'm going to ask in a public space, what is it that's drawing you to the beaches? I see the pictures, I see the videos, and they are gorgeous. What is happening inside you that you're drawn to taking these photos? क्या हो रहा है?
क्या कुछ I think एक खींच आ रही है. So this started off a few months ago when my internees and myself, a couple of other people, we were documenting between Dolmen Mall and Village restaurant, in between what's happening, extension of restaurants, constant construction, and these insane amount of master plans that are being floated. So on YouTube, we saw some videos and we were like, you know, we've been having this conversation with Arif Bilgomi and हम ऐसी आपस में ये बात कर रहे थे. तो वो हमने we did a case study between these two spaces, how there's a monumental structure over there जो निशान इम्तियाज एक तरह से बना हुआ है. So that's done by DHA. So I was looking at the architecture identity of that area, that from a small kiosk shop for a space where one could buy like a tuck shop, how is it being converted into a restaurant? And then what's the outline, the periphery line, having a conversation with the people. तो वो सारी चीजें हम कर रहे थे. Now this block 2 के जो पीछे वाला, it happened that one of my friends, Taimur, had gone one day on his own walk, and I saw his photographs, and I got really like excited because this was that space where when we moved into my house, I lived right behind, like, you know, 2 lanes behind. And I used to go, as you know, as a young child, I used to walk down and go to that space and us patti par, and the pani was very close, you know. So I couldn't relate to Temu's photographs, and I requested him to please take me next time when you go. So we went at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I couldn't believe that I had to walk at least 35-40 minutes to reach the shore. And there was insane amount of reclamation, dumping of, you know, sand. And ये आवाजें आती रहती थी पिछले 2-3 साल से कि वहाँ पे बहुत dumping हो रही है. A lot of like friends of mine, they live on the sea periphery pe, apartments mein. They kept asking. This was more like a drawing room conversation. I never paid attention to it because my focus was towards inner city. Right. And it's very recently that during quarantine time that Awaz had kind of subdued of the inner city, the sounds, you know, the noise, the chaos. And I was looking for something outwards, something which is unobstructed. And I went, once I went with Temur, second time I went alone, third, and I went early in the morning. Then a friend of mine said, "Mujhe bhi leke chalo," usko bhi leke gayi. So इस तरह 2-3 दफा जाके, I mean, it's really like preliminary. I can't even say that, you know, I've understood the depth of it. But from the area, it seemed like one can see in future housing society being built. There's already a China port. So the interesting part is that when you Google China port, nothing shows up. And when I'm walking on that line, which is, there's a bridge, I haven't posted those photographs. I'm taking some time to learn and understand why these linear bridges are formed in the water. And this is my own personal research. I'm trying to gather information on it. So when I went on the GPS, I couldn't see. It seemed like I'm standing in the middle of the water. So, you know, this whole censorship of master planning is like, I'm really interested in the politics of like what's happening where the public is not aware. And this area is also very popular with the TikTokers. And I keep seeing them. Quarantine ke shuru ke 2 hafton mein one did not see anybody, but now people are playing cricket over there. The activity has started again. And parallel to that, there's also like an indigenous family living over there, which is a मुझे लगता है ऊँटों के खानदान है जो ऊँट own करते हैं, and they also do fishing. So उनका एक छोटा सा village है, उनके backdrop में Icon Tower है, Dolmen Mall है. So this kind of disparity was really very, it made me really nervous that what are we doing with our city? You know, we're consuming all the time. We're constantly, there's a constant consumption and there is not giving back. Today also I posted some photographs. I mean, these are organically morning glory being taken over on the main road, on the jump, you know, the speed breaker hota hai. Uske upar pura ek jaal bana hua tha. And I'm like, look at it. And it's almost like the morning glory is crawling towards the sea. वो उधर पहुंचना चाह रही है और वो एक कंक्रीट को सैंड को कवर करते करते कहाँ पहुंच जाए, one God knows, till people awaken and they start trimming it, thinking that the more you trim, the beautiful it look. But sometimes organically something that's growing is supposed to be left alone. And then also while I was walking and I was documenting in my own, like, you know, it's not a serious documentation. I haven't gotten into the depth of it, but I look at how we are disconnected from what's existing, and we are constantly recreating something which is not for that location or for that site context. You know,
This is it. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I was waiting to get to this point. This is it, Marvi. This is what I want to talk about. Really, is that what is our ego need to constantly be designing and building for people and places which neither ke liye is relevant or contextually appropriate, you know? And you said something wonderful, which I'm going to go take you back to for a second and talk about the sound, right? So you're used to the sound of the inner city. And the sound of the inner city is ye wala oral. Also, there's a sound that you hear of its own calling, its own SOS for help, it's a Bezavan environment that and you reach out to say that this is what it requires, this is what we need to do for it. These are the cruelties that are being imposed on it, whether it's political government or just people being obnoxious because they think they're old buildings, so who cares? So let's talk about the sound these years of the inner city, and then juxtapose it from the sound that you're hearing of the morning glory desperately climbing across that annoying speed breaker to reach its mother, which is in the, you know, let's talk about those sounds. Sound here, intuitively.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, sound is such a, I mean, it's such an abstract notion. One sound, like there's a very definite sound which one hears in a city. For example, when I was walking on that shore, that I've been taking my long walks and, you know, inside the sea view ka side hai. Once I'm in that zone, I can see the background. I can see the urbanity. I can see these vertical housings, but I cannot hear anything. So it's almost like it's on a mute. The city is on a mute, and I'm seeing everything, but I can't hear, and all I hear is nature, which is beautiful. I mean, it's I mean, and I'm also then fearful. Okay, ye kab tak hum now is this my new preservation? Is this the kind of preservation I'm thinking about? Okay, do we need city within city nature aspect that needs to be controlled? Old town का भी एक silence बहुत मजेदार है, where the material talks to me, and sometimes I mute the chaos of the traffic, of the people complaining all the time, the infrastructure, which is absolutely valid. That infrastructure is the reality, where heritage becomes the backdrop and the living standards become the forefront. But then I have to separate myself, and when as an architect, when I look at the beauty of old town, is that there's history, there is this narrative that we need to study to understand the idea of identity. A lot of students come to me and they talk about the architecture of Pakistan, and I've never been able to answer that. You know, there's always a shared narrative, shared history, fluid borders, what came here, what went there. So I'm not going to get too much into that because, you know, I know that you cover that a lot. But it is so important for a student to understand that why did this craftsman use this kind of material back then, and why is that craftsman not being used now? जब उसकी demand supply नहीं होगी तो कभी वो काम आगे कैसे चलेगा? So then why do you want to get angry about it? Oh, look, why do you want to live in this nostalgia and a memory where you say that, you know, why can't we recreate that? It's not about recreation. It's about taking from that and rebuild, designing a new aspect with a linkage. Linkage is missing in the city. Everyone wants to design in isolation. Everyone wants to design in a very separate, egoistic, that I have done this, not that we have learned from this. So yeah.
Is that part of our educational curriculum that does that? So why are we not taking from our history, do you think?
Of course, there is a curriculum missing. I mean, you know, apart from like a 3 to 4 credit hour course in heritage will not lead you towards the depth of understanding that teaching art and architecture history and giving what I do is a place making or space making heritage politics coursework once a year in a 6-month semester is not possible for a person to understand, you know. तो ये चीजें मुझे बहुत bother करती हैं कि ये हमारे component almost from second year या first year onwards 5th year तक होना चाहिए. It should not be left alone. It's not supposed to be seen in isolation, or it's not a check mark that you need to say, oh, I have studied heritage. My first lecture always is that after you're done with this component, you're not a heritage conservator, you're not a heritage like a consultant or a person spokesperson. You're not. You have to understand the methodology, the scientific aspect of it, or you do a lot of field work and you gather your experience from that. Then only you have the liberty of calling yourself an expert. So that can only come when you are constantly doing research and observations and creating mapping around it. And also, mapping, I don't mean like the old school mapping. I mean how you receive information through your eyes. The alignment that you spoke about last time on Monday is so important, because that what grounds you. That alignment, you have seen it vertically, I see it horizontally, the linkage.
So, Marvi, this is very interesting. Also, it's very difficult for me to call you Marvi. I call you something else. So this is very bizarre. I call her out of sheer love. I call her Master Saab, and I think there is a huge compliment because she really is like sleeves rolled up, getting into places like a master craftsman would have done years ago, and without fear of politics or heat or temperature, just gets into it like a warrior. So I'm going to go back to calling you Master Saab because I'm just more comfortable. So, the content is a really important issue. And the second stage, everything that we've been taught in terms of architectural education, there's a little bit just like a token element of heritage put in. If you would say that everything we've learned before was linear, is now obsolete because the digital world has taken over because of the quarantine, because of the lockdown. The true sense of the digital world is now coming into play, not just as it's been before for entertainment through social media. It's now actually playing a role in terms of technology that will create more, better, deeper connections, even though we don't have the tactility. But I wonder if, like you said, in terms of this alignment, if we should look at our history of cultural alignment with this, and other such scholars, and then put Western structures, curriculum, syllabus, philosophy aside, and say, look, why don't we come back to some very, very early and forgotten Eastern thought processes from China, from us, from India, the Kama Sutras, for instance, and look at the scholars, regional scholars, Iraq, Iran. No
Yeah.
sound. What do you think?
Yeah, it's breaking a lot, Zed. But yeah, I heard you.
About recreating a new narrative that actually takes more from heritage than you describe right now that we're not taking enough from. It's just a, dramatic little statement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's one part where you say cross-pollination geographically. So there's a lot of information, but I am like so focused on South Asia and Southeast Asia that the influences are like so incredible, and there's so much learning space within that you don't really have to look outwards. In this context, the course that I teach, in that I'm so specific about, don't bring me precedents from outside. Bring me precedents from within and tell me your own local gurus. Tell me who are your local masters. And I want to learn from that. So, the whole idea of like having your own heroes or who you want to become, the becoming becomes like this. Becoming is a very important process. Even instance for like, when I was in college, for me, I looked a lot into Raj Raval's architecture. For me, I mean, I don't know why I was like totally like floored by his work, because he learned it from the stepped wells and the architecture of temples. And then he built these incredible buildings around India. Doshi, for instance, these are the people that I brought that kind of precedence into my work. Until today, if I have to look into and design contemporary spaces, I have a modern language, but it's all connected to what I have seen visually. So there's a lot of visual documentation. So we bring our references through our own mapping aspect, which are this ethnography that we've collected, either be Khairpur, Port DG, the amount of work. And I was very lucky at a very young age, I started doing a lot of field work, which I have my own database now, which I can refer and pinpoint and say, oh, I must have seen this kind of a joint or a mortar, which I've seen it over there, and we can reapply it here. So this cross-pollination is not only from geographically, it's also professional. You've got to bring an artist on board. You've got to bring a legal person on board, that what should be an SOP of touching a heritage building, the facade of it. And right now, when I am looking at inner city from a perspective of built environment, I don't look at it in isolation. I look at the stories within those buildings. Who are the people living in them? How are they connected to it? So when whole Empress Market violence happened, I was really interested in the periphery of it. What were the apartment building wale looking down in the balcony, looking at what's happening? How are they relating to it? What's their connection? So, sometimes it's very easy to jump into the core of the problem what's interesting is to spread out and look from a larger lens.
So the larger lens, and I've seen work. So I think it's a really beautiful way of contemporary storytelling, where one takes what they see from their eyes and their hearts and the alignment of the brain, the heart, and the intuition, the gut, compiles their own mapping in that database, like you, and then when you regurgitate it as an innovative new design, not connection, it's not been created out of isolation, it's not been created out of ideas that are third generation of some imperialist, colonialist syllabus. It's from your own people, your own neighborhood, like you said. I don't want precedents from us. And you're a great example of retelling that story.
Yeah.
On charge of all these memories that you. So the have for you is that, can we use that as a model to construct a future of education, I think? And what do all these beach pictures, which I'm so mesmerized by, what that they tell you? How will you bleed that into all of it?
Well, a lot of people have been working on. I mean, I know there's a Karachi Beach Radio project. They have done a lot of incredible work. Suhail Zubairi every Sunday goes and does incredible work on the other side, which is Dolmen Mall ke uske village ke us taraf. It's not about territorial. Someone is working in that context. Everyone has their own take on how the beach is reacting to the city. The first thing that you will hear in our conversations with the artists, yaar samandar itna piche chala gaya. So I usually in my internship program, I make them read Samandar Ki Chori, written by Asif Farooqi. It's such a beautiful story, and we read it out. It's quite a good, long read, 1 hour lagta hai, but that's part of my internship curriculum. Like, we have to do this, and it's bizarre. Like, there are a couple of group of people who are sitting there and talking about कि समंदर कहाँ चला गया, गायब हो गया. तो ये तो एक base है. What I'm doing right now is I'm looking at nature from a perspective that what's existing, what's right now, what's growing organically without you curating it, without giving water. There's no source of water, and there is this amazing vegetation around it. And then there is ecology. हर कीड़ा वहाँ पे नजर आ रहा है, किस तरह का है, क्यों है. All I hear, if you look at those videos I had posted, you can only hear birds chirping, you can hear gecko, this lizard kind of आवाज एक बहुत ही typical सी आती है, वो आ रही है. But what's mesmerizing is the backdrop. I mean, these incredible 4 crore apartments right at the back, which in a shabby condition, terrible condition. The facades are looking dilapidated. It looks like a horror set design. And then there is this amazing front, which has nothing, just the edge and outline. And in between, you see this transaction of ships, yachts, oyster. And and as a kid, I remember oyster rocks being quite far. अब मैं जाती हूँ तो I've seen people walking up to oyster rocks. How is that? So it's because उसकी पानी इतना पीछे हो गया है और इतनी हमने लैंड रिक्लेम कर लिया है कि I don't know, there will be a point where it will react. There will be a reaction. Nature always reacts. So it's very dreadful. I mean, it's quite scary कि वो क्या होगा.
going to be fantastic because I think that nature has started to react. Even if whether the coronavirus was created by nature or by some, or we blame it on some animal, I don't believe is the truth. I think it's been created by some stupidity that some smart ass egotistical human scientist has created and now not been able to control. But nature is going to get back and react and respond because she's way more powerful than we will ever be. So if you look at uh, the population of humans versus the population of all the other creatures on this planet, we're a very small number. If you look at the amount of land mass that we occupy versus the amount of space that's occupied by water, we're again in a minority. So I think nature, and as you've been documenting, now not driving over the plant and they're not pruning them and then nature getting a chance to breathe, right? And you started some of this work with the trees of Old Clifton and working with the banyan trees that were falling down and helping, turning them into heritage trees and saving them. And I think maybe that's where this has trickled through. But those images that you take, uh, I see a lot of photos on Instagram of all sorts of people's beach pictures. But it's amazing because you're always, almost always looking at the cinematic expanse of the ocean. And you feel these pictures are people feel they look and escape from their present lives. Your work is under your feet. It's all pictures taken like this, looking down. They're not shots of things 40 feet away from you. They're shots of things 4 feet away from you that you can reach out and touch and you can pick up. So those pictures are really, I find them so mesmerizing because it's like you're touching one of these things. There's the jellyfish or the seaweed or the little purple flower or the seashell or the barnacle or the dried starfish. You're so close to all of them. But the ecosystem always shows. So it's so fascinating to see how you've gone all the way up to nature and are looking at the same beach, which I grew up in also, by the way. And in my childhood, every summer, water would be coming over the edge. I would even before those apartments were built. I saw those apartments being built in my youth. So that ages me instantly. But I remember driving and seeing these horrid buildings.
Yeah, I mean, here I wouldn't shy away to mention that there's a dear friend of mine who puts amazing Instagram stories. She's moved to Australia and her name is Adira Kamran. She's been documenting forest and seafront, both from very different angle, and she really gets into the depth of what the texture feels like. So I've been really inspired, but hers is living landscape. What I'm looking at is deterioration and decay, constant decay. Like when I saw the jellyfish, it was so transparent that I could see pebbles underneath that. And I was like, most of the ecology that I've seen is all about what's happening, right? So, and then when I come on the land, it's a different type of aspect, which is sand, dry, जो animals भी हैं, जो ecology भी है, वो भी उसी color की है. So it's very difficult to find them. They're kind of hidden. So, in the quarantine, my first week, I will talk about the idea of abandonment. I, as an architect, felt like I feel very abandoned now that I don't have any relationship with the city. Who I am right now is when I go in the field. So I was very confused. My first week, or say 2 weeks, was this feeling of abandonment. Then came the idea of isolation, that how do I feel in this isolated aspect, and how can I recreate what I do outside? And I think that's what pushed me. Then came a moment of solace that, in your own speed, what has given me now is a lot of time, which I didn't. I'm always running around. Ye bhi karna hai, ye bhi ho gaya. So there's a lot of consuming in a very, very slow process, which has been incredible because now it's given me time to write about it and put my notes down with these visuals. So everything is backed by a visual. That I think is an incredible feeling, which I haven't had the time or the chance to get into. The last one was like, acceptance. now maybe this is the new change. It's scary. I mean, I don't know. There's no precedence, right? I can't learn from from other platforms. So we have to create our own ways of dealing with quarantine, and how are we going to deal with the economic scale? How am I going to teach now? What is right now? I've been helping a few students who've been writing their thesis, their dissertation. And I got really annoyed in my first few weeks that how is she writing this without doing a survey, or he or she? And the aspect, how is this person kind of backing these large statements? So the person is reading from other literature, but is that person connected to that literature? That really bothered me. And I was like, oh my God, now we have to think of another type of mechanism where we bring the field through this digital platform. And I don't know how that's going to happen, how we will bring that experience into the digital platform. Yes, there is this idea of 3D mapping, all of that. From your drawing room or from your room, you can see architecture, you can see spaces, but how are we going to create our own methodology? I don't have an answer for that. I don't know how that's going to happen. How are we going to bring the experience part where you touch and feel and you talk and you are in the same room where there's high ceiling apartment and sadar ki आवाज बाहर से आ रही है और आप oral narrative ले रहे हैं उनका, तो वो वाली चीज कैसे क्रिएट होगी digitally, especially in our context? Zen, I can't hear you.
Because
बहुत दूर से आवाज आ रही है, but yeah.
Is the way forward, because you can capture sounds and we can capture visuals and stick them together. I mean, for instance, earlier today, we were talking about, there was a friend of mine in Melbourne who was on a different live chat, and they were trying to discuss work like ours, which is tactile, right? I take people to buildings. I want them to hear the building, hear its silence. You want the oral history project to hear the noise of the city in the background when the recordings are being done. There's temperature I want them to feel. There's an energy.
Of course. Yeah.
Virtual environment, all that feeling is gone because you've got this filter in front of you. But books have always created environments that you could imagine. Films take you through environments that you can imagine. They inculcate fear, they inculcate love, they inculcate tears, pathos. So we may have to look at books and film and music, right? There's music that you and I have both heard that just ronte khade ho jate, right? That's hair-raising. It's so powerful. Even in Saraiki language you don't understand. I mean, I've watched and listened to tear-jerking opera in French and Italian. I don't understand any French and I don't understand any Italian. And the English opera was the worst because I understood too much.
So you feel it.
So you feel it. And that feeling is actually stronger than one when you understand it in its totality, like the English version.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have to figure out other ways of coming to that same point, because we will not be able to do site visits. Your students will not be able to do first-hand site surveys. I will have to find an alternative to virtual tours because maybe I won't be able to access those places with as many people as we would have done before. Or maybe the travel will take much longer. I mean, I don't know, hazmat, masks and whatnot, we could do it. But they will... And education is going to take a turn because many, many classes are going to have to be done online. So for instance, in your case, that thesis student, instead of being able to go to site every day and gather first-hand material, may only be allowed to go to site twice in 16 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, we are going to create different methodology, of course. I mean, the government, I've been looking closely and reading the new SOPs that are being floated by the government. And I'm really keen on reading कि अच्छा इस दुकान के साथ क्या हो रहा है, construction के साथ क्या हो रहा है. or how the, I mean, today, for instance, I went to hypermarket, Zen, and this is the one in Dolmen Mall. And I just went for the experience. मुझे कुछ लेना नहीं था, but I heard from my driver कि ये अभी I went there, I 6 meter separation तो था ही, but then you had to sanitize your hands, wear their gloves, their mask, not your own. Then you go inside, there is a cube which throws this chlorine spray. Then you go inside, you only take the trolley that they give you. So a lot of like this fear notion of like how they are conducting that, how the experience should be. So and then I saw this heart-wrenching photograph from China where children were sitting in a school with masks and this headgear. So I shared that photo with an aunt of mine, and she said World War II ke baad, there were black and white photographs that were floated where children were wearing gas masks. And this whole isolation where we wanted the kids to be free of it's okay to hug or it's okay to show love to the other person. Now we are kind of calculating what the person and how close that person will be. It's a very strange aspect, you know, to even dilute it into your own practice. How does that work? It's quite stressful, I feel. And rahi baat fieldwork ki, yes, it will have in its SOP, ho jayega cheezein. But main ek aur cheez dekhti hu ki how our cities run, you know. When anywhere abroad, when you go, the city closes at a certain time, at 10 o'clock or 8 o'clock. Okay? The only thing that you see are these, you know, signboards, Times Square, it's lit up with the lights. But the shops, there's a system, there is a nizam. अब हमारे शहर में चीजें ही 12 बजे या 3 बजे खुलती हैं. Electronic market, for instance, Rainbow Center वाला जो area, Regal Chalk. On Friday, it opens after namaz and goes on till midnight. Then on normal days, it opens at 12 o'clock. So we need systems in our city as well, where the city also has some space to breathe. 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, आप एक normal आम शहर की तरह बंद कर दें. This whole idea of Karachi, the city of lights, Karachi, the Paris, you know, all these archaic notions need to be thought about and talked about. These are not the right description for a city. The city needs to close down at a certain time so that you start early. What are we doing? You know, we're constantly consuming, and so yeah, that's a food for thought that we need to talk about with our governance. And I spoke to Assistant Commissioner that, you know, what do you think about this? How are you going to work with electronic market wala area? Wo kab khulega uska aista aista. So it's like we are developing SOPs. Magar maine kaha, you make sure that there are some systems and structure. I don't want to go more into details because it's not very, you know, conceptual thought. It's more pragmatic. It's very model based. कि ये हमने adapt कर लेना है. मगर वो हमें करना है as citizens of the city. We've got to talk about these problems.
You know, interesting, you mentioned that. So I was going through my random archives a couple of days ago. I must have noticed that last year I did a talk at the Karachi Biennale on the right of Karachi. And I found those little snippets of videos and I posted them a couple of times. And it's so interesting that the rights of the city, not the humans in the city, because everything about rights is human-centric. We don't talk about the rights of the beach. We don't talk about the rights of the marine life. It's always human-centric. You know, it's so boring.
Yeah. I mean, don't take photographs. Don't film here. I mean, these are the stupid statements that we come up with, but we don't talk about the right of how to use and consume a space.
Exactly. So I found those snippets and I posted them. I thought, you know, I need to come back and revisit this. And it's amazing because today you're talking about the health of the city. We don't talk about at all. Like, what does the city actually need? Like you said, to regroup, to sleep, to breathe. Like, we never talk about the city's need to breathe and to, like, pull itself together, you know, wash its hair, fix itself up, get some sleep, put some nutrition. You're right. We don't give the city any nutrition. We're consuming. We're always taking from it, right?
Yeah.
because I think we've grown to assume, especially urban environments. And for instance, Jean and I have been talking about, I mean, we started this discussion in 1994 of the 20 mega cities of the world, and they're all peers, they're all siblings of each other. I revisited that project with Arif Saab recently, as you know, and we're remapping that issues of cities in today's idiom. 94 is now obsolete, it's irrelevant, it was so far back. But today it's a different note. Like, for instance, the animals, when you look at any map of any city, human hospital, human school, human this, human that, there's no veterinarians marked, there's no hospitals for animals marked, there's no water bodies marked for beasts of burden, for dogs, for cats, for donkeys, for horses. There's no rest areas mapped. So there's a bus stop, but there's no sheds, there's no rest stops. I mean, the donkey guy has brought his donkey cart or his camel horse.
मगर ज़हन ये सब होता था तो मुझे खुद बताओ, water troughs were there. They were the landmarks. And you know, water trough का design ही अगर आप, if you study that, it is so beautiful. On the ground level, it's for the animals, and on the upper level, there's a small dip where human can drink, and the water circulation is the same.
Yeah. So
the design is so incredible. It's you know how the shape is. It's like a T, ulta. T hai. और उसमें there's language, there is a circulation, there's a structure, and there's a humane part of it. So socially it's apt, architecturally it's apt, and it's a landmark of that area. So, and it was spread out.
I think these are the things we need to go back to and turn up the volume on them, because they were also created outside of the city's master plan. If you go to the master plan of our city of Karachi, for instance, when these things existed, the master plan doesn't reflect that. They existed because certain minorities created them who had power and wealth across the city and were able to do it. Mostly it was the Parsi community, if I'm not mistaken, who were responsible.
Hindus also, there were a lot of minority community that did that.
So, and those days they weren't a minority. So I think that, you know, this mapping idea of how do we show these, because until it's not put into a master plan, we won't get a sense of the city's need to breathe. And I think you've hit a really important notion that maybe in the future we can talk about constructing an identity and a profile of what the city needs. Apart from its right, it needs time off, it needs silence, it needs fresh air, it needs to be washed. You know, I don't know about your childhood, Marvi, but in my childhood, every 7 in the morning, the streets used to be washed in Karachi. I haven't seen water-based washing, actual washing of the roads. Early in the morning, the city used to be washed. And
yeah, I've been hearing that from, like, you know, my father keeps talking about it, and yeah, but you know, if we pull out ourselves from that nostalgia and we talk about now, we are constantly creating maps which has historical centers or historical buildings mapped onto it. That becomes our landmark. But we never talk about humane mapping. You know, yes, how that one area or one nexus is dealing with their people. तो उसमें क्या-क्या होगा? Demographic wise, इधर एक अस्पताल होना चाहिए, जानवरों का होना चाहिए, इंसानों का होना चाहिए, एक थाना होना चाहिए, एक वाटर एरिया होना चाहिए, वो सारी चीजें जो कि पहले होती थी, ऐसा नहीं है. We learned from archiving, mapping से, and where have we gone? So we are constantly talking about, you know, 2020 master plan, we're talking about 2025 master plan, which is irrelevant exercise, I feel. Arif and I have been talking about this, why do we need to get into this? And it takes a lot of money to design a large urban map of a city. It should be given to smaller centers, smaller areas. Malaysia should have their own map. You know, South, हमारे पास सब distribution है, DNC, South, East, West, सब है. All we need is that each sector maps out themselves. So it's a grassroots level map. And then you try to join it, it'll become like an incredible piece of information. We don't have that. We don't have those layers.
We also don't have the training institutes to train the people to make those, even those little grassroots maps that you're talking about. If it's in Malid or District South or East or Kurangi or Site, Arif Saab and I talked about this, not Arif Balgomi, but I need to bring him on here also, but Arif Hassan said, who is going to make these, regardless of the scale? He said, okay, you know, Marvi says, you know, Master Plan 2020 is useless, and then you agree, and we're looking at Berlin and Beijing. But when you bring it back, he said, "Tum banaoge?" वो मार्वी खुद बैठ के बनाएगी, बनाएगा कौन? And अच्छा चलो एक दफा बना लिया, who's going to understand how this thing works, how it lives and breathes? So we've lost our training institutes, which brings me back to the education part.
Yeah.
Even so somebody has to start training these municipality workers who are responsible for running the administration, needs to be trained to understand what you're saying, because what you're saying is really, really important. And these people out there, you may have a understanding ear on with the assistant commissioner, but Marvi, that's a one-off. And you know, he hasn't existed 20 years before, and he will not exist 20 years later.
So then you make one proposal within that year, they transfer ho jata hai. So it's such a transferable city. But you know, you're right. I mean, education, maybe mapping is not only about, you know, documenting and measuring. It needs to be done in a very, again, I feel like there should be a mapping college undergraduate program. You know, it's not a credit hour course. Again, mapping is a severe matter. It's not a 6-month course.
So this is what Arif Saab and I talked about, this whole mapping and master planning and understanding the workings of a city to balance out the poverty and the sewage and the water coming in and the corruption, to balance all of this, and the migrant population that comes into Karachi to earn a living. There's a nomadic population that's huge, that lives on the periphery, that makes our edges very, very pulsating. We have a whole lot. Our footprint is the same as Los Angeles. That's something to think about. We're plus more than 20 million people. Not all of them are permanent residents, and not all of them have the economic background. So to have an administrative body, even if it's in 8 districts, where each district manages its own, or 6 districts or 12 sub-districts, that's still a huge amount of population to manage and problems to manage. So I think it needs a 4-year, 5-year course. Urban planning and the administration of a city. Karachi University has an administration program at its master's level. I think it's 1 year. I mean, what is one going to learn in a 1-year program at KU on master plan and administration of a city like Karachi? It's not. I don't think it's possible.
And you know, these urban, like space like urban resource center or the mapping center, उसमें आप जाते हैं तो it's like आप किसी बैंक में गए हैं खोलने के लिए, पता नहीं उसमें से क्या कोई गोल्ड निकलेगा. भाई, map is supposed is a base for any kind of conversation. You know why? I don't know why there is this fear of sharing a map in the city. Anywhere I go, they'll be like, क्यों चाहिए blueprint? भाई तुमने बनाया है, अब उसके ऊपर हमने काम करना है. Why? And these, like, you know, isolated resource centers. I mean, I'm not saying the urban resource center was doing incredible work. I mean, I'm not, but there are other centers who are doing another kind of mapping, right? Even like heritage mapping, whatever they want to say. This should be a public depository. I should be able to take a certain section and build over it, and then maybe sign an MOU like that I can come back and give it to you, though, that information, so that it becomes into a public archival system. We don't have that. We don't talk about it. It becomes a very self-isolated space and a very bureaucratic space. You have to have a card. You need to have a letter. And when I go there, I have to show that who I am through an authorized person or a civil servant. So there is this stages of bureaucracy that I have to cross in order to get a small footprint.
So Marvi, this is a, I think we should come back to this topic on another day. But this process you've just described, this bureaucracy that makes you as a rightful civil society member, it makes you untrustworthy, and it makes you a subject to a system that is above and better than you. So that is a system of governance which we have inherited from the British, and we have not fixed it.
No.
So this your voice, and that you want to give back to your city, and that it should not be questioned because you are doing it with the best of intentions. You're a professional. You're not some random dude off the street. But the fact that you're not allowed to break that ceiling unless it's really, really heavy-handed is a process that we have inherited. I've run into this with all my public projects. Ab zoo ki baat le le, getting the dogs on the street to go through TNR program. We've all private sector has run into this bureaucratic system that we have inherited. And that administrative system for the city, for different communities, for the breathability of your city that you're talking, all of this has to be restructured at that fundamental level.
I have a decode for that. I have tried to solve that situation.
And what happened? No luck. No luck, obviously.
So what you do is, when you do a certain project of that level, involve citizens, involve people into it. So when I did, when a group of us did railway camp station, for instance, or when I was right now doing Banyan project, what I did was I made it into a people's project. When there is a pressure from the people and when they become part of it, you develop a sense of ownership. Okay. And then you cut the cord. You say, okay, we have designed it, but now it's become a project for the people and for Karachi. Then you involve them and you every 3 months do a soft opening. I've done this part. Please come and give me a critique. So constant dialogue. This really works. I have also made similar mistakes where I've gotten kuchlod and my project has fizzled out. I had no say on it. But the moment you make it into, like how activism in a forefront of press club works. जमा करो लोग, एक वो aspect, आप उसको अपने profession में apply करें. It'll really, I think it has worked for me. I don't know how it's for others, but I think this has worked for me for 3-4 projects.
So I think this is a model that should be scaled up. I will certainly learn from it. I'll come and pick your brains on that. But we need to talk about scalability, the future in a digital age. We need to talk about how all of these things can be sustainable, the merging of your natural decay with the architectural decay and all that work. And, you know, unfortunately, Marvi, you've opened up so many different topics for us to go on and on. But, you know, Instagram's going to cut me off in the next 2 minutes. A request for your permission to let us end this part of the conversation today. I would love to bring you back on and continue, you know, do a series of these with you on the different topics, because you've opened up so many avenues. But आज के लिए बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आपका. Thank you so much for your time. So lovely to see you after ages.
Thank you so much, Zain. It's always lovely talking to you. And you and I are very used to 59 minutes.
I know. I'm overlate. So, Marvi, lots of love. Khuda Hafiz.
Thank you so much. Khuda Hafiz. Bye.
Thanks so much. God bless you.